Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Puchaline Nivasesha Sunyavadi Pashtatara Satarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Sadi Gauravakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Okay, it's still moving. Okay, so we are on the chapter. We're doing quite well. We've made quite some ground in this chapter. We'll be finishing called To Empower the Intelligence. And we're really looking at, analytically looking at the whole mess that we are in. Yeah, encased in this material body. And it's quite complicated. We have lots of things to negotiate. Yeah, lots of senses to have to live with. And they seem as if they have their own demands apart from our quest for achieving Krishna's lotus feet. Yeah, and this picture very graphically describes the situation which we spoke on a little bit last week. Where were we? Actually, we could say we are here. See this? But actually, we're transcendental to the whole thing. That's a whole discussion as well. But more or less, the experience can be being controlled by the senses. It can be, could we say, quite a horror story? We might say, yeah, to one degree or another. So we are trying to tame these horses, you know, so they can take us back to Godhead. So hopefully this discussion will help in that, looking at this, you know. So, yeah, I was just reading beforehand, before we opened up of what we're going to be covering. It's very exciting. It's very nice. Some positive tools are going to be given to us in order to win this battle. So we're going to be looking at that. And so let's have some readers. And someone could shoot their hand up. And
where is the hand?
Begin. Otherwise, I can choose someone.
I can read. Oh, there is quite a few already there.
Okay. Well, I was thinking, let me just. Gopi Gita, mother, are you out there? Can you hear us? We never heard you read. We haven't been blessed by your.
She's there. I heard her just now talking to
Tulsi. Might be busy. She's probably busy. Tulsi. Okay, we shall. Gopi Gita, are you there? Where everyone wants you to read. All right. Oh, she's on mute. No, she's muted. Everyone wants you to read, Mother Gopi Gita, but one question. Do you have the book?
I'm sorry.
I know her. She won't. You can read. You know you can read.
Do you have the book, Mother?
She's muted herself now.
Oh.
She's too scared.
All right, we shall get you next time. Okay, let's just take it from the top. Anupama, perhaps Gopi Gita doesn't have the book.
No, she won't have the book.
All right, okay.
And probably.
Okay, all right, we can let you off this time. Okay, Anupama.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Sorry, can you remind me where we're reading from, please?
Yeah, we're reading from page 211 at the top.
Okay, to repeat, yeah?
But perhaps if you just go back to 210 and begin the paragraph as previously described. That give us some context.
Okay. As previously described, the functions of the mind and intelligence are different, but complementary in a way that enables effective direction to the senses. That direction may be for the purpose of sense gratification, purification, or loving service. However, as long as one is in this world, sensual action is dependent on guidance from the intelligence through the mind. To repeat, the connection and control between the intelligence and the senses is indirect. It is through the mind. There is an obvious objection to the above, which we pose and answer below after the following preface. For the intelligence to be guiding the senses, it must also be in control of the mind. How else could the mind be the instrument of control for the senses? The driver of the chariot must be properly handling the reins in order for the horses to know where they are going. But in a heavily conditioned soul, the mind is more powerful than the intelligence and independent of it. In our analogy, the reins are either out of the driver's hands or his handling of them is not effective. In other words, conditioned life means that the mind usurps the function of the intelligence and acts against the soul's best interest. Thus, the picture of a renegade mind creates a kind of circular reasoning for the sadhaka, which is as follows. If the uncontrolled mind is the cause of material activity, how can it be the instrument with which to bring the senses under control? How does the intelligence first gain strength to again overcome the unruly mind? The answer is, the intelligence again becomes strong by the intercession and mercy of saints. Saints give a divine association and transcendental knowledge, which both nourish and strengthen the intelligence. The intercession first kickstarts the intelligence and so gives it an initial leverage over the mind. And by the same continued mercy throughout successive stages of sadhana, the intelligence increasingly gains mastery over the mind. To help understand the ascendancy of the intelligence, we should review Krishna's instruction to Arjuna and the repeated emphasis. It gives to the fundamental process of mind control. The Lord says, gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Let us look at some of the important words in this verse. The first, sneha, indicates that controlling the mind is a gradual process, not instantaneous, and the second, sama, indicates that such control requires a systematic approach rather than a random one. What is this systematic approach? Krishna says, Atma samastam, which in the case of Bhakti Yoga means methodical sadhana. In other words, by the systematic practice of sadhana bhakti, the intelligence gradually gains strength, and thus it is able to gain increasing mastery over the mind. And such increasing mastery means that sometimes the mind is under control and sometimes not. Sometimes the mind is in control. Increasing mastery means that even as a sadhaka's mind wanders during Nam Sankirtana meditation, he forcibly brings the mind back to the holy name, an effort which may or may not be successful. Sometimes the mind will wallow in sense gratification. That is the stage of unsteady devotion or anista sadhana bhakti. But here is the key. By continued practice, the intelligence incrementally increases in strength, while contact with the holy name incrementally purifies and controls the mind. Thus, gradually, steady devotional service, nishta, is attained. Thereafter, a practitioner develops taste, ruchi, the stage of devotion that completely changes the dynamic between the intelligence and the mind. What is that changed dynamic? At the stage of ruchi, a steady increasing relish results from every limb of bhakti yoga. As the mind spontaneously aspires to taste that relish, its struggle with the intelligence abates. The result of this...
Let's just pause there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, some light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. The whole process of Krishna consciousness, more or less, if we apply it, then gradually, it doesn't happen overnight. Gradually, we can rein in the uncontrolled mind. Yeah, and Maharaj mentions incrementally. So Shanai, step by step. And sometimes we will be successful, and sometimes we will not be successful. Yes. Like today, at least for some time, I was not successful in controlling my mind. What was that? Well, I sat down to do some study, and I went to put one class on the YouTube channel. So I pressed the dreaded YouTube. I pressed the YouTube channel. But before I could get to my channel, I got captured by war and mayhem. Yeah. By the, I don't know if anyone's heard, but there's a bit of a war going on at the moment in Ukraine and Russia. So, I mean, I know it's going on, but of course my mind was kind of looking at some of the details of it, watching tanks get blown up. Things, I mean, once you've seen one tank get blown up, you've seen them all. So anyway, I kind of, from there, then I went somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. And then before I knew, yeah, half an hour's gone, So I had to bring my mind. Finally, I pressed my YouTube channel and did what I was supposed to do. You understand? So it kind of, we deal with these things, we may do to one degree or another on a daily basis. Sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. Of course, my mind didn't go where it would have gone before I took up Krishna consciousness. So that's a relief. Still, it has its tendency. Anyone can perhaps share some battles and perhaps some successes they've had, or with the mind and the senses, which are shareable. Maybe in regards to whatever it may be. Any questions or comments or any things to share? Let's ask a question. Has anyone ever experienced being misled by the mind and the senses?
No, never. Perfect.
Huh? Everyone's sadhus, sadhvis. Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So here we're getting, so what did Maharaj say that, what was the, what's our saving factor? There's one slide we put up. And it's a favorite picture of mine, actually, the slide we put up. One of my favorite pictures of Prabhupada. What was the point? We put this, well, if I put the picture up, then you're going to see the quote. So there's a main point where the whole thing starts to become positive. By the intercession, okay, I give you.
Is it if you chant properly, or
Yeah, but why do you begin to chant?
To control your mind, to try and bring your mind back from the whatever object of the a distraction it is, mind to the steadiness, some kind of steadiness, and then it's the sort of increasing the increment, isn't it, of the mind control?
Correct. But where did you get the idea from?
Because saints, here it says saints give divine association and transcendental knowledge.
Here.
Which gives us nourishment and strengthen our intelligence.
Yeah, so which comes from the intercession of saints, of devotees. We start to hear transcendental sound. So, this picture, before I took up Krishna consciousness, I was looking at magazines about the Hare Krishnas. And this picture really captured me, because everyone looks so serious and grave. It is all young men, and they all look like mystics to me at that time. They're all really listening intently to this man here. This man is Srila Prabhupada. And I was just so attracted to it. But anyway, so Yes, when we begin to hear that, that hearing may be in the form of books, Srila Prabhupada's books, which is actually transcendental sound in written form. But when we begin to hear about Krishna consciousness, and who do we hear from? We hear from saints, so the intercession and mercy of saints. That's where we start to get some positive or some valuable inspiration, so to speak, to actually even begin to think about controlling the mind. You know, yeah. So the intercession, the intelligence again becomes strong by the intercession of and mercy of saints, and shanai, step by step. Yeah, step by step. This step by step may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years or more, 11 years or more. Yeah, step by step. But we get help on the way as well. All right. Anything from any reflections on that? Otherwise, we can continue reading.
So it's association and sadhana, practice your sadhana.
Yeah, basic. Yeah, association. And chanting the holy name daily. Chanting the holy name and the practice of Krishna consciousness starts to bring the ship into port where it's supposed to go. You know, those horses start to calm down. Yeah.
The mind will wander, but keep bringing it back to consciousness.
As we know, that's the sixth chapter Bhagavad Gita. From wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering, one should bring it back under control. Bring it back till it gets the message. Yeah.
Yes. And will it eventually surrender? Probably.
Yeah. Now, what's the dynamic that starts to make everything easy?
Nishta and Ruchi then.
Yeah. Ruchi, Nishta, and then Ruchi. Because then you've got a reason, then you've got an inspiration. You actually have an experience. You're inspired by what you are experiencing. So you're going to go to the right place, yeah, naturally, yeah, because it just fills you with happiness. Yeah. But even, should we say, even at that stage, still the material energy is very powerful, that you may also turn towards material energy again. But then gradually get more taste, and then you can stay fixed. Anyway,
it'll come to a point when material desires won't be. You could control them. You know, they'll come, but you could change your opinion.
Yeah. In other words, the material desires that you had or have will become laughable to you. What was the point of desiring that? You know, why did I desire that? Why did I desire a Lamborghini, a red Lamborghini? Why did I desire that?
I can give you an example of what happens to me.
Yeah.
Okay, when I go to shopping in Kingsbury, now every shop is food shops now. The smell there and everything, you know.
Oh, cooking, like cooked food.
Like Indian spicy things, you know.
Okay.
Fried
Okay. Yeah.
all sorts of, you know, all Indian nice things, you know. She's going, and I'm going shopping for Krishna. And then, oh, shall I get beer puri? Oh, no. Then I turn around and think, wow, look at that Mahaprasad that's in the fridge. I go home and eat. Or what I would do is I have the Mahaprasad before I go shopping, so I don't even feel I want anything.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. Mahaprasad. Yeah, what's that? Saridada Vidyajal, Titandiya Tego, Kirevli Shahakare. Senses so uncontrollable. Lord has given us such nice Mahaprasad.
Yes.
Very good. So in one sense, we can think of, hopefully Mullah was given kind of innocent examples, but it can be someone it can be more gross examples, you know. Someone may, you know, make it quite gross, where someone breaks to regulative principles because of an uncontrolled mind. Yeah. But let's read on, shall we? Because there's some more positive tools that are going to come. Yeah. So let's, Chandravalima, I can see your hand next. Something in the chat.
Where are we?
Mind, yeah, Gaia's just wrote in the chat. Mind is like a yo-yo. Everyone knows what a yo-yo is? You used to have yeah, mind is like a yo-yo. Yeah. Up and down, 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 up, 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 up. But we have to throw that yo-yo mind away. Okay, Chandravalima, you can read.
Where are we?
213 at the top, beginning paragraph.
The result of this peaceful condition, the symptoms of developed goodness, is that the guidance of the intelligence is primarily on how the senses can get increasingly joy from devotional service, and not on how the senses should refrain from gratification. At this stage of our study, let us return to the sadhaka's struggles with the mind at unsteady devotion, an understanding of which is essential for a devotee to make successful sankalpas. After the Sneha verse, the Lord says, from wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must suddenly restore it and bring it back under the control of the self. Herein, the Lord confirms that the gradual and systematic approach that he recommends earlier does not come without challenges. Properly holding the reins and effectively exerting command over wild horses is a win-lose endeavor. Sometimes the driver, the intelligence, succeeds in his effort, and sometimes he does not. Therefore, Krishna says, as they rebel against this new restraint, expect the mind and senses to go this way and that. Reading this, one may ask, is there another less mechanical and confrontational way to control the mind? The straightforward answer is no. There is no magic formula to bring the restless mind and sense under control, other than the already prescribed magic of Bhakti Yoga. Krishna encourages us to persevere. The mind is easily agitated, nischala, flickering, chanchala, and unsteady, asthira. With such character idiosynthesis, we should not be surprised at the struggle required to master the mind. Therefore, from wherever yato yatas, the mind wanders, from there, tata tata, one must repeatedly withdraw it. But how does this address our question on how the renegade mind becomes the instrument with which the intelligence regains mastery over the senses? We repeat, both continual effort and purifying nature of sadhana bhakti accomplish incremental gain over the mind. This gain is visible in two ways. Firstly, that the mind gradually accepts proper conduct, and secondly, that as it becomes increasingly attached to the activities of sadhana, the mind loses its taste for sense gratification. The result is that the mind becomes an increasingly effective instrument by which the intelligence can guide the senses. With this basic understanding, let us continue to hear Krishna's further guidance on mind control as relevant to the dynamic between the intelligence and the senses, a dynamic which is so instrumental to the determinations of power.
We just pause there for a second because Has anyone experienced that? What Marge is describing at the top of page 214 is where you make a sankalpa, or you make a determination, and immediately almost your senses seem to become more agitated. Like, for instance, you may make, okay, I'm going to fast today. I think tomorrow's Ekadashi, isn't it? Tomorrow's Ekadashi. So, or maybe Janmashtami. And because you're going to fast. As soon as you make that declaration, then it's almost, I don't know, how can you describe it? It's almost like the senses, you know, they are not conscious entities. Thank Krishna for that. Yeah. But it starts complaining. Yeah, you get lots of tests actually come. And actually, not only that, but actually more, you can say, systematic prayers for stages of advancement and serious commitments brings along with it different tests that come. Yeah. The more determined sometimes we are, then the more we can bring on different tests. Yeah. Anyone experienced that type of phenomena?
Yeah, I always find that
Yes,
as soon as you kind of get a little bit more serious about your Krishna consciousness, you know, you say, well, I'm not going to look at the news. You suddenly find that you're so attracted to looking at the news that you weren't so attracted before you said you're not going to look at the news.
Yeah.
And it's Krishna,
yeah.
like, I understand, like, Krishna really like makes, higher the bar a little bit. He's the controller of the senses, I guess. So like when you say you're going to do something, he actually gives you a little help by making it more difficult.
That's very nice. Yeah, that's very, to hear what Mother Labanga said there, quite profound what she said. As soon as you try and Krishna, what is that? Krishna makes it a little more difficult to actually help you. Makes it a bit more difficult to actually help you. Yeah. So yeah, we experience it. We make different sankalpas or determination. So what we have to do at that point is keep cool. Don't panic. Just keep going forward. Keep going forward with your newfound determination. Yeah. It's a bit like, sorry, I keep thinking these examples in Christianity.
And also,
yeah,
don't get discouraged if you actually like fall back a little bit.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well.
Because sometimes, you know, if you don't succeed straight away, you think, oh, this is like too hard, I can't do it. It's like, it's not going to happen. Just don't get discouraged, because it will happen. You know, Krishna's very helpful.
Another good advice there. Don't become discouraged. There's nothing that Maya likes better than a discouraged devotee. First of all, Maya strikes you. You may get, let's say, Maya strikes you down, and then when you go down, you're going to give up. Maya, yes, give up. What's the point? What's the point? You've been doing it for 5 years, and you've fallen down. You've done this or whatever happened. No. And how are we going to keep encouraged? What can we do to keep encouraged in times, say, of maybe a setback, big or small or whatever? Sadhu Sangha, no?
Yeah, associate with devotees.
You have to associate with devotees, you know? Associate with devotees. Keep these, as Vaisheshika says, keep the sound vibration going and keep the association with devotees. Yeah, so very good points there. Good points there, Krishna. Yeah, especially the point as well. We shouldn't give up. We shouldn't become discouraged. So, yeah, so these things will happen. We will make determinations and we make sankalpas in controlling our mind, in following principles, etc. Then it's going to cause some friction. You know, it's going to cause some friction. But we just keep cool and just carry on. All right. So Chanavali just disappeared to answer the phone. So let's, Kornamai, you'd like to read? You can pick it up from, where were we? Where are we?
At the bottom
Yeah.
of the page.
Yeah, in
the next verse. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. In the next verse, the Lord reassures us that constant effort at controlling the mind is indeed fruitful. The devotee will attain the spiritual platform, Brahma Buddha, where the senses are so fully under control of devotional intelligence that they enable the sadhaka to attain transcendental happiness, sukham uttamam. In other words, the senses facilitate the attainment of bhava. In the verses that follow, Krishna continues to glorify such attainment and describes the symptoms of spiritually situated Vaishnava. But Arjun remains unconvinced. In his experience, the mind remains restless and unsteady, whatever efforts are made by the intelligence, and so its control over the senses remain ineffective. And Arjun, the greatest warrior of his time, undefeated in battle, but now a victim of his mind, continues to doubt his friend's advice. He repeats his argument and gives a graphic picture of what controlling the mind is like. Tasyam nigraham manye vayor evasu duskaram. To subdue it, I think it is more difficult than controlling the wind. The reader will do well to take note of what happens next. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is flexible on ways to attain the goal of life. He offers a variety of alternatives on piety, yoga, and bhakti, based upon the inclination of different types of seekers. He is quite liberal. But when answering Arjun's questions above, he gives no alternative. In this matter, he's inflexible, very conservative. He agrees with Arjun's observations. The mind is like the wind, but he continues to repeat what he has said before. O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work, but he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. The Lord does not debate the unbridled nature of the mind, nor the difficulty to control it. He even uses the same words as Arjun to describe the mind's fickle temperament, but he repeats his earlier assertion. There is no easy way to gain control of the mind. However, to simplify the process, the Lord gives two processes essential for restraining the mind, practice and detachment. Other lesser authorities concur with the Lord's summation of the process of mind control. Patanjali says that detachment and practice are the essence of this attainment. He writes, one stops the functions of the mind by practice and renunciation. In our analysis of the verses above, we observe that while repeating the need for renunciation of the two, Krishna seems to give greater emphasis to practice. This is seen how he qualifies sadhana with two adjectives.
Oh, disconnect.
Karnamaya, you muted yourself.
You're muted, Mother. We cannot hear you.
Okay, there we go. So while renunciation is attained by giving up all distractions from spiritual life and embracing all things favorable for it, practice indicates that one has to accept the path of sadhana as followed by great authorities. This means casting aside speculations and deviations. Moreover, one must remain firmly determined over an extended period of time, and even longer time perhaps one would like. Paraphrasing Krishna's response to Arjun, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, "What you, Arjun, have said is certainly true, but although one may be afflicted by a serious disease by regularly taking the right medicine, according to the doctor's prescription, after a long time the disease is cured. Similarly, although the mind is difficult to control, by dedication to the process of meditation on the Supreme Lord, Abhyasena, and by the dissociation from the objects of enjoyment, Vairagyena, it is possible to control it. And all this must be done under the guidance of the spiritual master. To conclude on the doubt that an uncontrolled mind can be the medium by which intelligence controls the senses, we answer, strict renunciation and practice empowers the intelligence to make incremental gains on controlling the mind. Thus, sense control becomes proportional to the degree of mind control. When the intelligence fully controls the mind, it fully controls the senses. This then is the connection and control the intelligence exerts over the senses. Srimad Bhagavatam confirms, gradually as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdraw it from sense activities. And by intelligence, the senses will be controlled. The mind, too, absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. Readers may take note how this verse calls the intelligence Buddhi Sahati, the intelligence driver, reminding us of the previous cited example from the Upanishads. But for the Vaishnavas, the intelligence driver is Krishna, and the bewildered Arjun soul is us. If we place the reins of the chariot, our minds, in Krishna's hands, then, like Arjun, we will be victorious in battle.
Haribol, Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
So that finishes this chapter. This is, we just completed chapter 12, Empowering Intelligence. So before we go on to the next chapter, which is a very important chapter, because the next chapter is entitled False Ego, the transient false ego. So we're going to look at that next. And there's very interesting explanations of the false ego. But any reflections or questions before we move on?
I like the way Maharaj has put it through so gradually and in small bite sizes, and you can understand a little bit of it.
Yeah, thank you. And do you have the you have the copy because you're reading, and he specifically he's done that on purpose so that we can understand this, what can be quite a complex subject. So he breaks it down, and then he summarizes, then he brings out questions, then he answers the questions with a summary. So it's very, very nice presented like that. Maharaj has done it. It's the way it's laid out as well. It's easier to read. But yeah. Yes. So anything else? Yes.
I was thinking, when you're reading it, it's kind of falling in place. And then you put it away and then you try and get grips of it. Then it kind of, you get a bit like, oh, it's a bit heavy, you know?
Yeah, like application of it. So like...
then you sort of go over in your mind and think, okay, this is how you should do it. Then you get, oh, it's a bit too difficult. but when you're reading, it kind of really makes sense of how you're going, you know?
Yeah, but we shouldn't underestimate the after effect that this reading and study has on us as well. Probably it might be somewhat to some degree an unconscious effect, but hearing about this subject definitely is going to help us on a daily basis, you know, to help bring the chariot of the mind under control. And I was just thinking as we was reading, as Kurumai was reading, that the verse Savai Mana Krishna Pada Vindayo, this verse by Maharaj Ambarish. Prabhupada would often quote it. So he always fixed his mind upon the lotus feet of Krishna. So the mind is the king of the senses. Then if the king's in control, then all the subjects will follow. So the subjects being the senses. Yeah. Yes, so gradually, let's just read this again, this final quote here. Gradually, as the mind gradually becomes progressively spiritualized, withdraw it from sense activities, and by intelligence, the senses will be controlled. The mind, too absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. Yeah. So that's the wonder of the festival of Krishna consciousness. Yeah, there's so much for the mind to do and the senses to engage in. You know, so many activities. All right. So, shall we dare look at the false ego? Are we ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
The transcendent. It's called transcendent. How to pronounce that? The intransigent false ego. Can anyone properly pronounce that for me? Who's got the book, chapter 13? The intransigent is that correct?
Sounds like it. Intransigent.
Yeah, I think that's right, Prabhu. Intransigent.
Yeah. Does anyone know what it means off the bat?
No, I need to look that up.
Can someone look it up for us? Someone who's got there can look up this word for us.
Labanga is good that. Labanga can spell it for you. You can look it up. In a class I was listening, if you don't understand the word, then you're not going to be able to understand the class.
Yeah, so let's understand the word. So
in the dictionary.
I-N.
It says, unwilling or refusing to change one's views or to agree about something. Her father had tried persuasion, but she was intransigent.
Okay, very good. That makes sense. Yeah.
Can you break it down a bit?
Well, we like, despite good advice, refusing to budge. Despite good counsel, being another word for it. Just refusing. What's I'm looking for word for refusing? Being I can't think of that.
That's the mind.
Yeah. So we've heard all about, we've heard about the mind, the intelligence, and the senses, and like how they interact. Now, part of the mess we're in is that we have false ego.
Advice.
Yeah. So this is a formidable enemy we have to look at, as well as the uncontrolled mind and senses. So we're going to be looking at now. This gets quite deep, actually. This chapter, I remember, it gets quite deep. We're just looking at, yeah, it really takes us down. It's going to take us, as far as I can remember, to the point of turning away from Krishna. All those kalpas, all those many years ago, many centuries, that takes us right to the point of the souls turning away and thinking they can be happy without Krishna. False ego. Yeah. So we're going a bit of journey here. So let's begin this journey then. So Sahachari Mother, you can take us into this chapter.
Okay, thank you. The intransigent false ego. The reader will recognize the pivotal role the intelligence plays in bringing both the subtle and the gross body into a surrendered service attitude. And as explained in the previous chapter, for the intelligence to be successful in its mission, it needs to bring the rebellious mind to heel. To make clear why the mind is such a rebel, why sense gratification is its second nature, we will elaborate on a statement that Baladeva Vidyabhushan makes in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita verse, beginning with Asamasyam Mahabaho. The Acharya writes, the mind freed of its unsteadiness becomes easy to control. Steadiness is accomplished by contracting the mind's spiritual indifference with the practice of tasting the bliss of the Atma, and by contracting the mind's restless nature by avoiding the taste for material sense objects. The point to highlight here is encapsulated by the phrase, the mind's spiritual indifference. The mind has an inherent spiritual indifference that every sadhaka encounters as one of his main challenges to attain bhava. And of course, spiritual indifference implies material fascination. The mind is fascinated by the Lord's illusionary potency. However, since the mind is but the instrument of the soul, it means that at some point, the living entity acquires both indifference to the Lord's service and fascination with his illusory potency. And then those same attributes are passed on to the mind. How and when does this happen? In his book, Brahmana, O Vaishnavar Taratamya Visayaka Siddhanta, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur describes this phenomenon in relationship to the entry of the living entity into the material atmosphere. We will elaborate on this point described by Saraswati Thakur as they relate to the acquired spiritual indifference of the mind. The above mentioned reference is from a lecture to an assembly of Brahmanas in Midnapura that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati gave at the behest of Thakura Bhakti Vinoda. The purpose of the talk was to show that pure Vaishnavas are superior to those born as Brahmanas. Later, Saraswati Thakur explained his lecture into a small book generally abbreviated as Brahmana O Vaishnavar. We begin with the undisputed understanding that the living entity, as a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is in its very essential and fundamental state, pure and free of material designation. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains the same to Sanatana Goswami. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabhunaya Sravanadi Suddha Chitte Karaye Udaya. Pure love for Krishna is eternally established in the hearts of the living entities. It is not something to be gained from another source. When the heart is purified by hearing and chanting, this love naturally awakens. Members of ISKCON are divided over the origins of the jiva. However, whether one is convinced that the living entity was in Krishna's pastimes or whether one is adamant that the jiva was distant from the Lord, it is clear that the serving propensity is present within the souls, either in an active or a passive state. And so, too is the free will to which Srila Prabhupada so often makes reference. The initial impulse or tipping point for the misuse of free will takes place in either of the above mentioned states when the jiva contemplates an identity other than that of a servant. Such deliberation gives room for indifference to set in, which then becomes the choreographer for the actions of free will. Although indifference means that the living entity subdues non-devotional as well as devotional propensities because he cannot long remain with such an undefined identity. His momentum towards non-devotional life causes him to contemplate it, and in due course he enters the material realm. Thus, his misuse of free will is complete. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explores the subtleties of the transition from the dawning of indifference to entry into the material world.
Can we just pause there, Mother Thatcher? So I just want to make sure everyone's on board with this first step, because you may not be familiar with it. The question comes up about these souls turning away from Krishna. This often can be a discussion, a natural curiosity and a subsequent discussion. But here, Bhaktisiddhanta is giving the first stage of turning away, actually turning away from Krishna, and it's called to be indifferent. And dictionary definition of indifferent is no concern or no sympathy. Like here it says, she shrugged, feigning indifference, like, I don't care. So, just it's good to begin by understanding this point. And they found this quote here. The opposite of love is not hatred, but indifferent. So you just don't care. We may have things like that we experience in life. There's things we don't care about. We're just indifferent. We're indifferent. Yeah. So it seems like Bhaktisiddhanta is saying is that's the seed. So let's make sure we're not indifferent to our devotional service, because that's how we got in this mess. Become indifferent. We don't have any concern. Everyone's with us on that. This first step that's given by Bhaktisiddhanta. Sometimes it's described like a curiosity as well. I've heard it. It might come up here. Curiosity, born of indifference, Yeah, we won't go into the origin of the jiva. Maharaj, he alludes to it, but we're not going to go in that direction. Whatever way Maharaj says, the problem is that, or whatever it may be, we have a propensity to serve. Yeah, and we should be serving Krishna. All right, what's the time? Let's just 3 minutes. Let me just read a little bit here. We'll go into this. Yeah, the Acharya explains that the state of indifference is like a neutral, inactive condition in which the living entity manifests just a tiniest degree of apathy. So let me just put in apathy in the dictionary here. I've got apathy, lack of interest, again, similar to, so lack of interest or enthusiasm or concern. Yeah. To serving the Lord. This apathy is the soil in which the seed of material enjoyment takes root. Thus, indifference becomes the foundation upon which the subtleties of material desire grow. Because of the unstable condition of indifference, neither devotional nor non-devotional, a bit tatashta, you're in between, and because of the ascendancy of material desire, the living entity begins to actually contemplate unconditional activities from his marginal position. And I'll just read this last paragraph here. As a sentient being, the jiva tries to rationalize his misconduct by speculating that the Supreme Lord is impersonal and not an object of service. With his intelligence thus infected by impersonalism, aversion to the Lord increasingly manifests. So, has anyone heard that word before? In impersonalism? In Prabhupada's books? It's on every page, practically. So this is interesting. Impersonalism is also the seed of our rebellion, and result of rebellion, or this desire to contemplate unconditional activities from his marginal position. So welcome to the full CEO, Hare Krishna. All right, so we'll stop there then for today. There's 1 minute left. I hope what we've said today and what we've read as well, what we've read and what we're speaking about is intriguing to you and has brought up some interesting, or I hope it's inspired you to control their senses and to focus on the service of the Lord. All right. Any final question or comment? Otherwise, I need to make someone else a host. Is that right?
Monday is yours, so it's fine, no problem.
All right, sorry. So I just cut everyone off.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay,
So much.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Tomorrow's Krishna Katha.
Thank you,
Okay,
Prabhu.
okay.
Oh,
Namo Namaha.
Bye, Shubha Bhadi ki jai.